Gilmer, who is Senior Director at Ankura out in South Dakota. And we really appreciate you getting up this early. I believe it's just turning 7 o'clock a.m. over there. After that, we have Didrik Beck, CEO of Elmatica in Oslo, Norway. And then finally, we have Lisa Craig, who is a counsel with the law firm Reed Smith over in Washington, D.C. I'm just going to let these three speakers introduce themselves, and then we're going to kick off with Steve Gilmer, who's actually going to explain to us what is actually CMMC. Following that, Didrik is going to go in more to CMMC applying to non-US companies. He has an extensive experience of working with this since Elmatica is a European company based in Oslo, Norway. And then finally, Lisa is going to talk to how does CMMC compare to other frameworks and her experience as a US lawyer who has also spent, I understand, several years with the US Navy. At the end of the session, the speakers are going to be talking about these big topics that I just mentioned for very briefly 10 minutes, so it's kind of short. So therefore, we ask you, if you have any questions, please ask them in the chat, and we're going to bring them up in the Q&A session right after Lisa finishes her piece. And then also in closing, I would like to say to you, Swedish participants in these two seminars, we're going to follow up with a roundtable discussion that is going to kick off at circa 3:15, so 15:15 Swedish time, and we're going to have a break. So this first introductory session will end at approximately 3 Swedish time, or 9 if you're on the eastern seaboard of the United States. So without further ado, I would like to have Steve, Didrik, and Lisa give a brief introduction, and thereafter we're going to kick off with Steve, and he will talk us through what CMMC is. Please, Steve.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Steve Gilmer here. My background is 25 plus years, primarily in aerospace and defense. In particular, interest to this crowd, as you most likely know, the Cyber DFARS 7012 that preceded this, that we've all been self-attesting to in this day 100-171. As a CISO at Sikorsky Aircraft, I spent nearly 3 years negotiating that as a cyber test case for the DoD. So I have a lot of hands-on experience with what the DoD wants, as well as what NIST intended from that standard, NIST 800-171. I spoke with all three of the original authors multiple times as that was rolling out and working on that. So I can tell you from experience, what we see in CMMC today is a lot of what they wanted back in 2014. So this has been coming for a long time. And I'll turn it over to Didrik. You're on mute, Didrik.
Sorry, bad habit, trying to stay on mute as much as possible. Good morning, Steve, and good afternoon, everybody else. Honored to be here. Also a member of SOFF in Sweden. I'm CEO here at Elmatica. We were established in 1971, so we're turning 50 next year. I'm not 50 yet, so I'm younger than the company, but I'm the third CEO in 49 years, so we have a quite long horizons, and we've been in the defense business since the late 70s. So all the way back to the F5, the F-16, F-35, and so on. Our headquarters is here in Oslo. We handle about 10,000 orders per year for different industries, but defense has always been one of our, how can I put it, main focus areas. And we're working with over 100 defense companies, all the way from Lockheed Martin in the United States to Saab in Sweden, Kongsberg in Norway, and Rheinmetall in Germany, and so on, securing and handling the printed circuit board, or in Swedish, mönsterkort, which is an intricate and important part of any system. And this is covered by CUI, which is controlled unclassified information, which means automatically CMMC and of course DFARS, as you pointed out, Steve, 7012, and the NIST 800-171 is something which we are quite accustomed to. And yeah, so thank you for allowing us to come today and share some more experience as a European actor. You, Lisa, thank you.
Yes, good morning, thank you, and good afternoon to those of you out there in Sweden. My name is Liza Craig, and I am an attorney with the Washington, D.C. office of Reed Smith. I had the pleasure of meeting some of you all and coming out to Sweden last December to speak on the similar topic a little bit earlier on, and it's a great pleasure to be back here and to sort of update the community on everything that's going on with CMMC. As Max mentioned, prior to me joining Reed Smith, I was an attorney for several years with the Department of the Navy Office of General Counsel. There, I specialized in supporting large defense procurements from a legal perspective. And I had the honor and the pleasure of providing legal support and serving as legal counsel to numerous flag officers and folks in the procurement space. I do have a significant experience advising on complex, high dollar value weapon system competitive procurements, as well as IT procurements. And I've spent quite a bit of my practice recently talking to contractors regarding CMMC and the changes that the new regulations and requirements will drive to their business. I also have the pleasure of serving as a professorial lecturer in law in government contracts and procurement at the George Washington University Law School, where I teach government contracts to LLM students. So again, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to the Q&A sessions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. I think in the effort of saving time, we're going to kick off with you, Steve, who's going to go through what CMMC is really all about in 10 minutes.
Sounds good. In 10 minutes, I will cover it up.
Good. I heard it's not that hard.
No, you just need to know it's 4 letters, C, M, and C. So, no.
Okay, thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks, Max. So, good afternoon. I'm just going to kind of give a brief overview of CMMC. I'll talk a little bit about the history, why it's here, what we need to do with it, what the DoD is looking for, and I'll try and answer the basic overall. What are the levels? As you see, 5 levels on the screens. And I'll talk about timing and the rollout. So when is it going to apply and all that. So as a couple of us have mentioned it so far, there was a cyber DFARS 202.254 7012. That's been around since about 2014. That was an early draft. It went into effect a little bit later than that. But that simply required that as a defense contractor or a sub-supplier to a defense contractor, that you self-attested as a company to meeting NIST 800-171. And the intent of that, as Diedrich had mentioned just a second ago, was to protect CUI. And that's always been the Defense Department's goal, to protect that information. And what the DoD looked at over the last few years is that of the roughly 300,000 companies that supply them, about 1% actually meet the intent of NIST 800-171. A lot of companies have self-attested. They've put together a POAM or a plan of action and milestones, and they came up with their security plan or their SSP, and they signed the bottom line and said, we would do it, we're good, and they never really fully implemented NIST 800-171 the way the DoD intended. So to correct that, because there were too many escapes, too many breaches of CUI, it was getting out into the wild and information was being shared they didn't want shared, they said we have to change it. And they came up with the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or CMMC. And that's what you see on the screen here. There are 5 basic levels, and basically levels 1 through 3 are where they expect roughly 99% of all suppliers to fall. Levels 4 and 5 are for really advanced persistent threats. Those are heavily based on NIST 800-172, which is in draft at the moment. And levels 1 and 3, if you look at level 1 and level 2 and level 3, they ultimately make up NIST 800-171. At level 2, they add in 7 additional controls that do not exist in 800-171. And at level 3, they add in an additional 13. So you can think of this as NIST 800-171 plus 20 additional controls. Most of those controls are slight enhancements of things that are already in NIST 800-171, or they're better process around the controls in NIST 800-171. What does not go away is you still have to self-attest to the cyber DFARS. So when the DoD awards a contract, they will say, with this contract, you must be level 1, 2, 3, or potentially 4 or 5. And if you are awarded that contract, or if you are a sub and you are given that contract, you will be told you must be at a certain CMMC level. In order to meet that, you will have to be certified. That means a third-party auditor will come in and they will do an audit of your organization, and they will determine if you meet that CMMC level or not. And it is binary, meaning it is pass or fail. You have to meet all the controls at a particular level, or you do not pass. If you fail one control, you will not be certified at that level. Now, our understanding at this point, because there have only been provisional auditors trained, there have not been, the first class of auditors have not been formally trained, but based on the provisional training, if you do not pass a control, you will be given 3 months to remediate that and fix it, and the auditor can come back and see if you've gotten that control properly aligned to CMMC if you have, and get your certification. So that's some good news, because early on that was not sure that there'd be an option to fix something if you didn't pass it the first time. So as I said, there's the 3 levels. We really expect that 99% of the companies will be level 1 through 3. And the DoD describes level 1 as basic. In fact, Katie Arrington, who is the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer for the DoD's OSD division, she describes level 1 as security somebody should be able to meet in their house. Very simple, just a few controls, easy to meet. It steps up until you get to level 3, which is considered good cyber hygiene. Now, this isn't great, this isn't advanced, this isn't focused on advanced persistent threats. This is what they consider any business, even a non-defense business, really should be at. And as I said, at the heart of it, it is NIST 800-171 plus 20 additional controls. Timing. The goal is to roll this out between now and 2025. So essentially, as contracts renew, then they will add this in. So if your contract with the DoD renews in 2 years, you should expect to see this in 2 years. However, there's 2 other pieces of timing to consider. The DFARS that provides the authorization for CMMC is expected in November of this year. And then after that DFARS is out, all new awards are expected to require CMMC at that time. The DoD is moving forward this year with 10 contracts. Just those are the test cases, part of the provisional. As we move into the new fiscal year, which will start in October, the DoD has announced that they will put this into 15 contracts. That affects 15,000 companies in the DIV, according to the DoD. The following fiscal year, it'll be an additional 25,000 contractors in the DIV. So they will continue to roll this out until it gets to all 300,000 over the next 5 years. So when you think about when will it be required, you need to think about when does your contract renew and when will you be going after new contracts after November of this year that will meet that. Now, I see a question there. It's a great question. What percentage of each level 1, 2, and 3 is estimated? That's kind of it's a really good and a really fair question. There's a little bit of a trick answer to it. So if you ask the DoD, the highest percentage will be at level 1, the next largest percentage at level 2, and the smallest percentage at level 3. And it gets smaller as you go to level 4 and 5. However, you have to think about this from both who do you supply and who are your primes. So I can tell you as CISO at Sikorsky, and I was part of Sikorsky when we merged into Lockheed Martin, and I took over as the largest CISO for their largest business unit there. You know, I had tens of thousands of subcontractors, and trying to maintain the, you know, sub 1 on contract 1 was at level 2, sub 2 on contract 2 was at level 3, sub 3, you know, and so it just at tens of thousands, it gets very complicated. You know, we know from talking to a lot of primes already, and I can tell you from my own experience, we would be asking our subs to go after level 3 just so we don't have to manage that mess of who's at what and what contract.
Steve, this is Mission Control Stockholm. You have 2 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, so the question is also, you know, who do you supply? You have to be at the highest level required. So if you're a sub to multiple companies and company 1 requires you to be at level 1, but company 2 requires you to be at level 3, you are going to have to be at level 3. And then once you're at level 3, you meet the preceding levels. So what we're, you know, advising companies across the board right now is heavily focused on NIST 800-171. Make sure you have those controls in place, not with just a POAM, but you've actually closed out all the actions on your POAM that you believe you meet 100% the intent of NIST 800-171. And then after that, once you get an award, if you're at level 1, 2, or 3, you'll have no more than 20 additional controls that you need to focus on in order to get there. So at this point, we really recommend a strong focus on NIST 800-171 and follow them to their true intent. Because remember, today, the DoD estimates, you know, less than 1% of the companies actually meet NIST 800-171 the way they're supposed to. And on that note, I will turn it over. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Without further ado, I pass it over to Diederik at Elmatica.
You're on mute, Diederik.
Sorry, again, old habits. I'm going to try and be very quick. Please, one back.
Diederik, what slide do you want?
It is one slide higher up.
This one?
Yes, thank you. Yes, so thank you for some very useful information, Steve. Will CMMC apply to non-US companies? And put it very simple, I was in a meeting just last week with Katie Arrington, which is, as I'm sure you'll all learn, is a very important person and one of the best speakers I've ever heard to when this CMMC was launched officially last year at Arlington Cemetery during the AUCA. It was only Elmatica as the only foreign company who was there for the launch. And I can also say that as of Saturday, we received accreditation from the CMMC AB, or the accreditation board, where Elmatica has now been entering the CMMC training in the United States officially through the board there. So, and as Steve is pointing out, this is honestly, as Katie said, this is actually not something new. because the contracts you've all signed and the default clauses are a mandatory flow down, which means that you're not getting away from that clause or the 70-12. So it means we've all signed to this. So the question is, but I think she was very polite during that meeting. And as you point out, Steve, only 1% are actually, how can I put it, fully compliant. So why they're doing this, they want to make sure. And they have not formally chosen any auditors for Europe yet. They have 25 auditors approved in the United States. It will be 72 before Christmas. And our company, we're planning to try and be the first company in Europe to get this, also because we're involved in many US DoD projects. So what does that mean? You need to, depending on what kind of role you have in your organization, you need to tell the board or the CEO that if you do not become CMMC approved, you can forget about any business with US DoD in the future. According to the contacts we have, this will not only apply for US DoD in the future. I'm quite certain that within 6 to 12 months, it will also apply for those supplying to the telecommunication industries. And we have received through our contacts, also the American Embassy in Denmark and so on, requirements for NDAs and so on, because they want to protect the data. And I think this CMMC is one of the best things coming for the defense sector in NATO for many years. So put it simple, yes, it will apply to you. There's no exceptions. It will apply if you have products, services, no matter what you are. One of my good friends, I cannot give you his name, he's supplying to US DoD software, and they just found out last week they have to be CMMC approved. Of course, this when you start looking into this, it has some demands regarding data and storage and so on, but very simple. If you want to supply, you have to comply. There are, of course, ways out of this, which I've experienced many companies try, for example, what they call in America COTS, or customized articles off the shelf. That means if you're supplying something which is non-critical, but even so, as Katie Arrington pointed out last week, if you supply a pen, you still have to be CMMC level 1. So no matter what you do, if you're any way involved in the supply chain, you have to have CMMC. But there are, of course, when you have a COTS article, that's more that then it's not defined as defense, you don't fall under dual use and other kinds of aspects. So please then jump to the next slide. And yes, yeah, and one comment is what we've learned, it's really about CUI, controlled unclassified information, and every country. What we have learned when we looked through BAFA in Germany, ISP in Sweden, export regulation in Norway, and open license in England, practically some people are arguing, but it's like this. If you have a drawing, if you design something in Sweden or in America or in Norway, it falls under CUI if it's used for defense specifically also. So controlled unclassified information, if you're getting any drawings or anything which is customized or special and specifically also for defense or used for defense, you will be CUI information. But just being a non-US effect certification of CMMC, I don't know how many meetings I've had in my life where people are trying to argue instead of taking the facts, and they said, no, it doesn't matter. We're all in the same boat, and what's very important is that you need to understand how this really affects your supply chain. Because even with our role, we have to get many of our subcontractors CMMC approved. And then we have to ask ourselves, what kind of information are we sharing with them? We're sharing drawings, okay, they need to be CMMC level 3. And then we're thinking, who can we get to be CMMC level the quickest? And then we approach those actors, because this will, as Steve said, it's one thing is for new contracts, but based on information I'm quite certain about is that it will suddenly, at the undisclosed event, also be applicable for existing contracts. Once they see this is really working, they will say, if you're supplying something at the currently, it has also to be CMMC. So it's not all necessarily when you are, how can I put it, re-signing a new contract. I think it all depends how quick they can get this implemented. So it can come quicker or slower than what we expect. Thank you, Matilda. Next slide. Yes, and CMMC legal applications and takeaways. I like what the Americans, they have, catch and release. It's not like that in the Nordic, culture. It's more like, we can discuss, we might be able to get out of this and so on. And in my experience, our company's personally been involved by US DOD and the Norwegian government to solve some cases. That's most specifically PCB because it has a drawing. But I can tell you, it's one of those classic or ITAR, like go to jail. It's important that your officers and the CEOs knows the implications. Because suddenly, if you want to focus on defense and focus on US DOD and you don't have this in order, that business is gone. So if you're on the stock market, I'm sure the stock market will ask what happened. So this is something I'm just urging everybody to take it real serious. And it's actually a great framework, and it's here to protect us, as Katie Arrington said. Information is flying everywhere. People are sending emails, not using encrypted servers. I mean, this is a small part of it. I think it's great, and I'm also quite certain, as I said before, NATO will adopt these rules. So are there any legal regulations, differentiations based on location? No, there's no excuses. Read the framework, go to their webpage. It's a very good webpage for CMMC. It has all the Q&As, the most important ones. Sit down with your officers and just present this. And it's not a disadvantage, and it's also an allowable cost, which means when you are renegotiating, the cost you have for implementing CMMC, which Katie Arrington points out every time, it's an allowable cost, which means it does not necessarily mean it has a cost any money, but it can also protect you better and all of us. I think that's the last slide. I tried to be quick. Yay. Yes, thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Didrik. That was very useful information, and a special thanks for being so brief. I think we made up some time there. So Lisa, it's time for you to wrap it all together and make sense of this and explain the legal framework.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I will say it's a pleasure following behind my two speakers. They have made my job very easy by providing such comprehensive information. Matilda, can I ask, can we just go back really quickly to slide 8? I want to just start off, we should have had these slides a little bit better organized. One of the questions that you all are probably asking yourselves is, when is all of this going to come into effect? And as you heard Dietrich say, businesses are already being certified by the AB. The DoD has made it clear that the summer of 2021, you would start seeing CMMC showing up in requests for information, RFI announcements that contractors are looking for to obtain business opportunities. And in the very near future, you will see this in the request for proposals. So as my colleagues said, which is very important, if you want to do business with the Department of Defense and you handle controlled unclassified information, compliance will be required, certification will be required, and these requirements will be fully enforced. So that's my first point. We can advance, Matilda, if we can, down to, let's see, I'm looking at my slides as well. Let's go to slide 12. Yes, thank you. So I believe Steve touched on this a little bit earlier. How does the CMMC compare to other frameworks? And this should be nothing new. The term CMMC, the accreditation by the accreditation board, is replacing the self-certification that companies can protect controlled unclassified information and can demonstrate great cyber hygiene. These are requirements that already existed. And so when you compare them to the NIST 800-171 Rev 1, when you compare them to the requirements that have already been implemented into the DFARS, there's very little difference. What there is now this third party that's going to come in and verify that you as a company are doing what you've attested to doing. So again, levels 1 through 3, which, as Dietrich said, are the levels that are going to really encompass the majority of certifications that occur, encompass the 110 security requirements that are found within the 800-171. And in addition to that, some other requirements. The CMMC has 5 model levels that actually exist. And each level becomes more expansive, but you will see that very much of what we've already been required to do within the DFARS are going to be encompassed in these levels. The CMMC is also not just looking at whether or not you meet these certain processes, but whether or not you have protocols and procedures in place, and a company has institutionalized the protection of cybersecurity in a manner that is going to keep the DoD's controlled unclassified information safe. Now, I wanted to just really quickly, before we go on to the next slide, give you guys a little bit of information about what controlled unclassified information can be. And this is, you're thinking about, why do I have to get certified? I'm not handling, I'm very low down in the supply chain as a supplier or so forth. Let me just give you a couple of examples of the type of information that the US government is trying to protect. Information related to agriculture or critical infrastructure, export control information, immigration information, intelligence information. There may be information of a legal nature related to a contract that the US government may want to protect. Obviously, NATO-controlled information, nuclear information, procurement and acquisition information, your company's own proprietary business information. All of this is the type of information, and there are others that the US government is trying to protect. And so if you are holding on to this information, or if you're containing it in your system, maintaining it, this CMMC accreditation is going to help the US government understand that you all have the protocols in place to protect that information from unauthorized disclosure. Next slide, please. Thank you, Matilda. So how does a company prepare? And again, my colleagues have sort of touched on this. You heard Dietrich talk a little bit about the accreditation body, that nonprofit independent organization that really gives you that certification, that badge of honor that says that you can do business. We've provided the website link there for the accreditation body itself. Make sure you bookmark that and check back. It's being updated quite often. As long as your company does not solely produce COPS products, and this was mentioned a little bit before, commercial off-the-shelf products that are sold commercially in the marketplace, it's likely going to need to obtain a CMM certification at some level. And so, of course, it's going to depend on the type and the nature of the information that's flowed down from your prime contractor. It's going to depend on the type of information that you yourself possess. But if you're in the purely COTS world, you might be able to get a little bit of a pass here. But if you are doing anything that's outside of the realms of COTS, that accreditation body is going to find someone to come in and accredit you. Next slide. But what can you do to prepare? It should be something that is in the interest of your business to really do if you're handling this type of information. You should be assessing whether or not your organization is currently 800-171 compliant. And part of that assessment is identifying any gaps, identifying any holes, identifying any areas where you need to beef up or improve your compliance, looking at those standards. You need to create, or if you've already got a system security plan in place, update that system security plan, make sure that it is robust, make sure that it is addressing the areas that it needs to address based on the data that you control. Put your plan of action and milestones in place in order to get into full compliance or to ensure that compliance is going to be maintained. You know that things are changing rapidly in this particular area. And so compliance on day one of 2021 does not necessarily mean that your systems and processes and protocols will remain compliant as the year goes out. So that constant monitoring and updating is going to be very important. If you're not in full compliance based on the 171 standards, figuring out what you need to do to get into compliance, putting that remediation plan in place, making sure that you've got a plan and a process going forward to get into compliance. And then, of course, once you're there and you've gotten that gold standard, how do you maintain it? What are you going to do to ensure that compliance is maintained? And most importantly, seek help if you need it. There are companies, there are entities, whether on the legal side or the corporate side, that can help you answer some of these questions and navigate compliance so that you can remain in the hunt for the business that you're trying to pursue. And next slide. And then we had a question about, whether or not CMMC is the requirements are going to differ depending on whether you are a large company, whether you're a big dog in the fight, or whether you're a small specialist. And absolutely, it's going to apply to everyone. The United States Department of Defense is not concerned with the size of a company. They're not concerned with the level of engagement a particular company has relative to a large contract. Again, the focus is on the maintenance of that CUI data, whether or not you've got that data and whether you can protect it. So whether you're a big dog in the game or whether you are playing a very small role, the key is if you have that CUI in your possession, you are going to need to make sure that you can get accredited and that you can remain compliant. So I believe that's the end of my next slide, please, Matilda. Yes, so we're in the questions phase, and I do see a question on the side, so I will read it out, and then I will open it up to Max and to my colleagues as we move into this Q&A place. How does the CMMC compare to the 27001? Assume there are similar controls, but does an ISO 27001 certified fulfill CMMC